It's insane how big this is. All right, guys, I'm doing it. 944 E-Drive loader. Let's do this. It is here. Holy crap! Look at the teeth.
So I'm 5'9", 5'9" with maybe 5'10" boots on.
You move a little material. That might load my truck. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's got the 4-wheel drive. Electric motor at each tire. You don't have any drive shafts, none of that stuff, no wear parts. This is the newest thing. This is the X, 944X. It's the beast.
So drive cables are really important in this machine. It's a 700 volt system, so I grabbed it. I didn't get fried. That's a good thing.
Okay.
We do that on purpose. Now these cables are actually proprietary and they're very, very good cables. The way they work, you can see on the outside here, we've got this, we call it Cordura. It's like a cloth sleeve. Everywhere that cable is unprotected, outside the frame of the machine or outside of its inverter, just like it is right there, you'll have that cloth sleeve. That's the first step. Underneath that cloth sleeve, you have a rubber. It looks just like a regular battery cable rubber. If you were to cut through that rubber, what you'd find is a mesh. It's a steel mesh, kind of like a woven mesh. If you think of a ground cable on a machine, those flat braided ones, looks just like that, wrapped around another rubber cable. And then inside that rubber cable is the actual 700 volt cable. The reason we do that is on each end of these cables, there's actually a steel bulkhead connector. And that's completely connected to that steel mesh. So basically it adds a frame ground around the outside of every piece of that cable. So let's say something gets in there and cuts that cable. We're always checking the resistance between that 700 volt center conductor and the frame of the machine. If anything ever were to cut through that cable or come close to cutting through that cable, we'll see a low resistance between the frame of the machine and that 700 volt system. If we see that, shut the machine down. We shut down all the system. In fact, there's 2 drive systems on this machine. There's one that powers the front left and rear right tire. There's one that powers the front right, rear left. So there's 2 separate systems. If we see a failure on just one system, you can limp home on the other system. It'll just kill power to one.
Gotcha.
And it does that on purpose. That way, of course, you can get it back to your shop to work on it, and so that we also can share the load, because your front axle is going to be the most loaded on any loader. As soon as you put weight in it at the pile, it's going to load up that front axle, right? And of course, if you had one system running the front, one system running the rear, that rear system wouldn't work half as hard throughout its life.
Gotcha.
So we front left, rear right, that helps you limp home, and it helps spread that load out for the course of the life of the machine.
So in your midlife and your re-life, talk about the battery cables.
The battery cables or drive cables?
So the drive cables, you check them, replace them?
So we're going to check them at a midlife, and at a re-life at 40,000 hours, we'd probably recommend you to replace them there. But for the most part, as long as they're not shaped, as long as there's no issues, we actually do not need to replace those at the 20,000 hour mark anymore. We did it first. We were being pretty cautious at first. We've decided that they've actually been living a lot longer than we expected, and we actually don't need to replace them.
So how many hours of experience were you saying this morning?
3.5 million hours on the electric drive system that John Deere has. Not this particular system, but just all electric drives in the CNF division.
So you're good at it.
Better, sure. I don't want to be too cocky, but yeah, we're getting better at it. The electric drive we have in this machine, just bar none, we love it. It's that motor on every corner, that true 4-wheel drive. It just makes this machine dig like no other.
And then you have fewer mechanical components to replace at a midlife or re-life. So no axles, differentials, transmissions, drive lines.
Correct.
So I guess fewer components to fail or rebuild in this case for a re-life?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay.
So you look at what we're actually going to do. We do that midlife. We're going to take, there's a motor in every corner, and it comes with a final drive, right? We're going to take that motor. If it's in the front left, we're going to move it to the rear right. We want that motor to spin forward at different directions. So right now it's spinning clockwise to go forward. We want it to go backwards, right? As we do the same thing, every motor's going to spin. We're also going to move the inverters, because every one of these motors has an inverter that controls it. We're going to keep those together. So we're going to take that inverter from motor 1, it's right here in this front corner. We're going to put it back with motor 3's inverter right back there. So we're just going to move everything around, kind of keep everything together as a pair, as a system.
Okay.
And then, so if you think about it, we're not replacing anything, right? We're just moving it. It's a little bit of labor, not a whole lot of expense. The only drive shaft in the system comes from the engine to that first gearbox.
Okay.
That gearbox goes ahead, it splits that out, so you have the 2 generators behind it. You've got your 6 hydraulic pumps up in front of it. That's the only drive shaft.
Wow.
So it's one thing you have to worry about if you're going to replace it at all.
And then what about in the final drives? Do they just get like drained and checked and refilled?
Yep, you got it.
Or replace as needed kind of thing?
Kind of check for wear, see if there's any problems. For the most part, they've been pretty robust. So that's gone pretty well for us. Another thing that's kind of nice to point out, of course, because we have no differential, we need to know when the machine's turning, because otherwise, if all the tires were going the same speed as you turn, that's what a differential does, right?
Right.
We need to make sure we can change the speeds. Well, to do that, we have this nice half moon black sensor right here. What that guy is an articulation angle sensor. Now they're on a lot of loaders, but the way we use them on this one is we can tell how far over we're steering, so we can tell how much faster we want to run the outside tire to make sure that we're not scrubbing tires. $15,000 a piece, we don't want to be scrubbing tires, right?
Awesome.
No, that's great.
It also helps with the traction control too.
Quite a bit of thought put into these.
Yep.
Yeah.
About a 10 or 15 year process for designing them before they came to their first customer. We announced it at ConExpo 3 times before we came out with it.
Oh, wow.
So now does Deere have X tier from 544, or how far down do we go?
So we go X tier on a 644, and then we have coming very shortly an X tier on a 744 and 824. Within a couple years, those will also grow to the 844 904, and then of course we have the X tier on the 944. The 944 does not have a P or a G tier. So this is the only way you get a 944, just like this.
Okay.
So you started with the big girl first, basically.
644 came out first.
Okay.
Just about a year or two in front of this one. But they were both being designed, like I said, this has been designed for the last 15 years before it actually came out. So it was being designed the whole time.
Yeah.
644 released first.
Take this slow, you got miles behind us, but miles to go. So let's just break this down to the simplest truth.